Welcome to Dev Better, the show where we discuss engineering and organizational problems we've encountered during our travels as a growing software development consulting firm. The idea of cloud computing goes back to at least as far as 1963, with the founding of Project Mac at MIT, funded by DARPA and the National Science Foundation, to allow multiple users remotely to access the resources of time-shared computers. Several years later, in 1969, J.C.R. Licklider built ARPANET, the forerunner to the internet and the first iteration of his vision of an intergalactic computer network. And in 1972, IBM created the first virtual machine framework for its mainframes. Some of the early internet service providers like CompuServe and AT&T offered some proto-cloud storage services, but very limited in scope. Cloud storage really caught fire in 2006 when Amazon launched S3. We've since seen an explosion of cloud services, platforms, and applications, including robust storage solutions such as cloud-based relational and non-relational databases. These services have liberated many tech-forward enterprises from having to build and maintain costly on-prem database systems. Amazon's relational database service is an amazing way to take advantage of the shared responsibility model and launch your favorite flavor of RDBMS in the cloud as complex or as simple as you need it, with room to scale later. Aurora was added to Amazon's relational database service lineup in October of 2014 with MySQL compatibility and added Postgres 3 years later in 2017. Its aim was to simplify database clustering and provide a cost-effective, robust, fast, and scalable multi-AZ database implementation. It succeeded, in my opinion, and it is our go-to recommendation for hosting MySQL or Postgres engines in AWS for many reasons. Let's dig into Amazon Aurora. All right, today with me, I have Christian Purnell, AWS architect, senior architect, actually. Would love to talk to you about RDS Aurora and how it is a fantastic product. We've been using it for a while for various clients, and I quickly gravitated to it as my favorite RDS product, to be frank with you, because you get so much out of the box. So I think let's just first start and talk about the general architecture of RDS Aurora. Explain it to me like I'm 4 years old.
Okay.
What is RDS Aurora and what are the advantages of using it?
All right. So RDS Aurora is our managed database platform based on Postgres. Actually, it could be you can use either Postgres SQL or MySQL database engine for it. What Aurora RDS Postgres does, it eliminates a lot of the manual DBA tasks that you would have to do, a lot of the OS level tasks that you would have to do as a DBA. All that's done for you. All the storage is managed. Really, you really click, set it up, and within an hour, you're ready to go and start adding data. So it really brings that management level down. It also has the feature of a lot of resiliency features built in, as far which we'll get into a little bit later in depth. But as far as being able to span multiple availability zones so that you can in one region and actually span the globe as well, multiple regions as well. So, which I know we'll talk about a little bit later. But in a nutshell, that's kind of how it's based. It has the core of it is Aurora RDS has a writer instance, and then it has up to 15 additional reader instances you can add to balance load and increase the performance of the platform.
For sure, and I want to echo that it gives you so much out of the box. That's one of the major reasons that we really enjoy it. I've actually had to stand up my own SQL Server mirrored instances. I've stood up my own MySQL read replicas and my own MySQL clusters, and it's hard if you've never done that. Folks in the audience, maybe if you're like a guru at Infra, it's a really simple thing for you, but a developer, an ex-developer coming in and trying to build something that's resilient and highly available, which is what we want in all of our database systems these days, is very difficult. You mentioned that it's y'all's platform. Did you guys write the engine for that, or I'm just curious, or did you reuse an existing engine?
Well, we reuse the database engines from MySQL, which was at one time open source, now is an Oracle product, and Postgres, which is still open source. So we took that open source code and we improved upon it, right? So we added all the management features, and now we have even a serverless version, which you don't even have to have any. A particular instance behind it. So it's really a pay as you use model. So that's what we developed in house on top of the MySQL and Postgres engines that were available.
That's awesome. So next general topic, let's talk about high availability, right? This is a
Okay.
thing that as an application developer, I usually just don't care about because that's the DBA's job, right? Making the database run is not my problem. DBAs do that. But now in the cloud world where infra is kind of my problem as an application developer, I am an advocate that people need to learn about what high availability patterns look like in these cloud systems, especially if I'm building an application that's supposed to take advantage of highly available database structures. So talk to us first. There's a couple of things that Aurora does, but let's first discuss global tables, which is a fairly recent feature, right?
Yeah, the global database features were really released in last re:Invent. So what this allows you to do is basically take your database and it really simplifies like cross-region DR, cross-region use of the database, so that you can really, like if you're a multinational company, you have offices in Singapore, Australia, and New York. You can put the data closer to your users, right? So you can have
Yep.
read replicas in those areas, so that they don't have to go across globe on the network to access the data. So it's right there closer to them. So that's really we wanted to get the data, push the data as close as possible to the people that need it. And also within that, you get an extra layer of high availability in case any of those individual regions went down. We could promote those reader instances to writer instances and fail over to those other regions. So that helps on that level as well.
Yeah, for sure. And we've used Global Accelerator as like a load balancer of load balancers that run across multiple regions. So whenever a database goes down, you just swap to the appropriate region. Is that an eventually consistent model, or are you guys like acid on those transactions?
We try to keep the lag between our reader and writer uh, instances under 1 second because our replication is at the storage level. So we do our storage level replication, where many other products like Microsoft's products for does log shipping or things like that, where it requires you to write to a log, read from a log, and ship it. We actually replicate the block storage from the block storage level. So that way the replication is much faster, and we're only migrating those change blocks. So that way, the database engine is really able to, even across a region, we're able to keep that lag within, usually within under a second.
That's awesome. All right. So we've been talking a lot about this word read replica. And some of our audience members may not be like super database gurus like yourself. So I want to kind of define what that is. Anytime you have a database that's sitting there and taking transactions, right? There's several ways to handle these transactions. I mentioned eventually consistent earlier. I mentioned this word called ACID. Basically, what that means is that how the transaction gets into the database really depends on the type, the theory that it uses to write that information to the database. And in addition to that, there's this thing called a read replica, which is an architectural pattern. Originally, I think it was built for more high availability in DR and just to make sure that you have something sitting around in case your main writer, what's called a writer instance, dies. You have something to point back to, and your application continues to run. But in these days, we see things like long running queries are shipped over to the read replica as opposed to having the writer instance have to deal with all of this. And I mean, there's many problems to solve. Like, do you do dirty reads or whatever? There's a ton of issues with using a read replica from an application architecture perspective that you want to solve for. But Aurora makes read replicas literally free. And that's amazing to me. So talk to us a little bit about that architecture and what the advantages and disadvantages are to read replicas cross region.
Yeah, so the read replicas, one of the biggest benefits I see is that, especially like you said, that query offloading. So that expensive queries that maybe slow down your overall system, you can offload those to multiple replicas. Again, like I said, if you got a big business intelligence office or a lot of business intelligence analysts, and they need to do a lot of in-depth data mining or querying of the data, they're not affecting your online transaction performance, right? So those are all shipped over to read replicas, and then having that data close to your end offices, like I said, especially with the cross region, being able to have that data in from your East Coast to West Coast to Australian offices, and have it, under, under 10, 20 millisecond lag, because those read replicas are in that region, that again improves the overall performance of the application. So I feel like those are some of the biggest advantages. Also, that the lag, like we said before, is under 1 second usually. So you usually, some of the other problems, like you had mentioned, dirty reads that you had with other ones, where the lag of like something like Golden Gate could be, multi-second, multi-minute. So you're not sure you're getting the latest data. Uh, you're more sure you're getting a reconsistent state of the data when you're using Aurora Read replicas, and none of that you have to manage yourself. We manage that from AWS's side.
Yeah, I think that's probably a thing that needs to be underscored is that RDS solves a lot of the management issues that, we've hired very expensive DBAs. And please, DBAs, I'm not coming for your job. I promise. There are other things that DBAs are really amazing at that you should be doing for companies. But sitting around and babysitting read replicas is a thing of the past, at least in my world. Maybe, again, if you run your own on-prem data center and you have folks that do that, that's fantastic if that's a need that you have. But for me, I don't have to worry about that because we're a cloud native shop. We just build cloud native applications in AWS, and we literally do not have to think about patching these replicas, making sure that the OS is up to date, even enabling simple things like minor revision upgrades on your RDBMS engine, which is very cool because it's all security patched for you. So that shared responsibility model is a thing that certainly underscores the advantage of using a product like RDS and by extension Aurora, which to me is like the Ferrari of the RDS side of the house. So one of the things that I have always struggled with databases, being an application developer, is why the hell is my query so slow? Or why is the database like, why do I have 1,000 connections open and the database is sitting there churning and crunching and spinning? And one of the ways we used to do this is we would have to look at host metrics, log into the box, log into the RDBMS, pending that it's not currently in an unresponsive state, run some queries on the RDBMS to figure out what's slow, what's going on. When you guys introduced performance insights, it was a complete game changer for me personally. I'm more of a data guy anyway. I've spent a lot of my career being a back-end engineer, writing like large APIs that do lots of data crunching. So this is near and dear to my heart. Performance insights is amazing. And I want to give you a chance to wax poetic over this feature. To me, it is a game changer for application folks like myself because it gives me so much insight as to what's happening on the host level and also on the RDBMS level. So talk to me about performance insights.
So what Performance Insights basically does, it, like you said, it gives you that dashboard. It gives you a dashboard where you can see both what's going on with the host as far as memory utilization, I/O, reads and writes, and then also what's going on in the database as far as expensive queries, waits, locks, latches. If things are being vacuumed or a number of different metrics, and you can create and customize those dashboards on what's important to you. And you can customize the time length, where you're doing the measurements from down to as low as 1 second intervals. So you can see where and when you're having your problems and really get into it. The Performance Insights is really intuitive because it's based on our CloudWatch dashboards, and so if you know how to use CloudWatch, you know how to use Performance Insights, uh, and then you can drill down into the data as you as you're seeing what's going on with the dashboards to get that insight that you're wanting, because behind that, you have your logs from your database, you have your logs from your host as well. And then in serverless, you just have, you don't even have to worry about the host as well. So I really feel like Performance Insights gives, especially DBAs and system administrators, those who are, who gets those calls every time, the system's slow, what's going on, right?
Right. Yeah.
You got 20 servers and all types of things going on. So you can really see, and if you have those multiple connections, like you said, there's things you can do with caching and connection pooling. So, and it really gives you, and then now we're, building in some intelligence behind that where we give you recommendations, right? If we see
Yep.
your
Yep.
performance insights, we give you tuning recommendations on, other configuration parameters to change to help improve the overall performance of the system.
This video is sponsored by us. To continue our mission of providing valuable educational resources to current and future software engineers and tech professionals, we've officially launched the Dev Better newsletter. Our monthly newsletter will bring highlights of the tech industry right to your inbox at the end of every month. Within each Dev Better newsletter, you'll find the top tech news stories, job postings that we believe are worth your time, and more importantly, development tips for your ever-growing knowledge base. If you think this is something you'd read, we've left a link in the description for you to subscribe for free. Now let's get back to the video. Being a consultant, finding a problem quickly for a client is like the golden calf for us, right?
Right.
So I remember several cases where I was working with a customer and we didn't have performance insights enabled on. They were running a MySQL instance. This is before we actually ported them over to Aurora. They had their own MySQL instance, and I remember jumping into performance insights after I turned it on, let it run for a few days, and within literally 30 minutes, I was able to identify at least 2 indexes that needed to be added. I was able to find 3 or 4 slow queries, which were all generated by Entity Framework. People think ORMs are God. Like, ORMs are great, but they don't always produce good queries, guys. Like, you need to pay attention to your SQL. I used to just write raw SQL because #boomer, right? Get off my lawn.
Exactly.
But for me, like, Performance Insights has been awesome because it gives me so much insights into what's happening on the host, and on top of that, how my application is behaving, and is it generating good SQL? Do I have locks on certain tables? Am I doing full table scans when I shouldn't be doing full table scans? Like, that side of the house is where I have spent so much time with it, and it's produced incredible value for literally no cost. Like, this thing doesn't cost anything. It's pennies on the dollar. If you don't have performance insights enabled on your databases, you should. I'm just going to point at you and say right now, because it costs you nothing and it gives you way more insight than you will ever be able to derive by poking around and running SQL queries.
Exactly. I agree 1,000%.
So, last question, Chris, is what is something you think is really cool? And we actually had this as a separate question, but the thing that you love about Aurora is this entire encompassing other set of questions I had. So I'm just going to give it over to you. What's something that you really love about Aurora, and why?
One thing I love about Aurora is, well, there's 2 things. One of them is Babelfish, what we'll get to, but also is how easy it is to migrate into Aurora and how to get started with Aurora. So we have things called DMS, which is our data migration services. We have the schema transformation tool. So whether you're running on Oracle or Microsoft, we can look at your database. We can tell you exactly what you need to change to migrate to Aurora. We can do it jobs to migrate those automatically. We give you up to date, look at how that migration is going. And then once you migrate that data, you can use something like Babelfish where you can start using your application immediately. So what Babelfish does, it does a translation layer. So if you have a .NET application or something that was running on SQL Server, it'll actually translate your SQL that you were using in your application on SQL Server. It'll translate that to run on Aurora Postgres, and that's amazing right there. That can save you thousands of dollars in licensing costs from running, Enterprise Edition SQL Server, where you don't have to using Babelfish, where it does that automatic translation. and it'll actually help you change the code as well. It shows you, if it can't do a translation on something, exactly where it is, where it might have a problem. So it'll help you with that as well. So it makes the migrations easier. And one of the things I do as a system architect, I work on a lot of migrations. So I think this is, and one of the biggest, stumbling blocks to companies migrating to AWS or migrating to Aurora is the lift. How much of an effort is it going to be to do this migration? And once they see all the tools we have in DMS, SCT, which is our schema transformation tool, and Babelfish,
Yep.
it really makes it a no-brainer to migrate to a lower cost platform that you're paying as you go, and you're bringing those infrastructure costs way down.
100%. And I wish Babelfish was around a couple of years ago when we did a migration of a .NET application that was on top of Entity Framework 9, I believe, and it was running on top of Microsoft SQL Server. Because again, Microsoft developers tend to go with Microsoft products, and okay, fine, that makes sense to me. I've been a .NET developer. I worked for Microsoft for a few years, and there's a really amazing development ecosystem that Microsoft has created, to their credit, through C# and TypeScript and all these wonderful languages that they've invented. But I don't like their database system. I'm sorry, shots fired. I don't like Microsoft SQL. I never have. I've worked with it for a long time. So for me, moving over to Aurora using Babelfish would have been very convenient and probably taken us a lot less time. I think we spent about 2.5 weeks migrating Entity Framework to use MySQL, and we had to reinvent all the schemas, we had to rebuild all the indexes, we had to rebuild all the tables, we had to write all these migrations, and it was a ton of work for the team to do that. Whereas if we can just take the application and point it at Aurora with Babelfish enabled and it magically happens, that would have been much, much better. Again, I still think you should probably rewrite that app, not to throw a rock at Babelfish, because it's an awesome technology. I think long term, you should probably rebuild that application to be native Postgres or native MySQL, because that's, to me, just a better architecture and a better pattern. But it's awesome that that tool exists. And I'm a huge fan. My master's degree was in static analysis and programming language design. So anytime people build transpilers, it makes me very happy. So that's exciting.
Yes, yes. And like I said, it's one of my favorite features. And like you said, it helps with all that heavy lifting you have to do to migrate from one platform to other. And that combined with DMS and SCT, it takes a lot of that stuff we used to have to do by hand, right? Writing ETL and
Yep.
SQL scripts to migrate from platform to platform. It does a lot of that for you. And again, it's free, right? So DMS and
Exactly.
SCT is free. And so there's less and less reason to stay on a high license cost platform if you don't have to.
100%. And DMS is a great product too. Maybe we'll talk to you about that next time. I've
Yep.
used it quite a bit. It's got some really cool features for migrating from one database to the next. We actually use DMS to go from this Microsoft SQL instance into Aurora,
Yep.
and it was very easy to configure. There were some schema translation oopsies, but hey,
Right.
again, there's always going to be something that you
Right.
have to deal with. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a job, right?
Right. If it was all just push buttons, they wouldn't have people like us employed anymore.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Maybe Chat GPT is coming for our jobs, Chris. We'll see.
Maybe so.
Awesome, sir. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you and all the wisdom you brought to the table. Again, AWS Aurora is a phenomenal platform. I usually don't fanboy over things. I try to stay very in the middle and neutral, because as a consultant, I want to bring the best technologies to my clients. But I'm telling you right now, Aurora is the best when it comes to a hosted database for simple OLTP style application transactions. So, Chris, thank you, sir, for your time. We
Thank you,
appreciated
Jeremy.
having you guys on. Absolutely. We'll talk to you guys later.